Alright, welcome to the first part of slope today. We're going to be working with two different equations with slope, and the first one is going to be something you've probably heard of before. It's called rise over run. Alright, so the way to figure out the rate of change of a line is to use this concept of rise over run, and it's best shown when we have a graph to work with. So remember, we're talking about straight lines here, which means we've got four different possibilities of the types of lines that we can run into. We've got these four right here. We'll talk a little bit more about rise over run on the next slide. But you've got these possibilities. You've got a line that can rise from left to right. You have a line that can fall or decline from left to right, horizontal line, and then a vertical line. And each of these has well, they have their own specific slope that kind of goes with them. I shouldn't say specific, but if it rises from left to right, so as you move from left to right, if it rises, we have a positive slope. If it decreases from left to right, we have a negative slope. Horizontal lines, they have a zero slope. I'll show you why that's true. And vertical lines have an undefined slope, and I'll show you why that is true. And the way that I remember this is I think of a treadmill. Okay. So for instance, if you started on the left side here, and you were to walk this way, and you would be going up, that is a positive slope. If you started up here and walked this way, and then ended up having to go down, that's a negative slope. When you have the treadmill set to a flat surface, and you can just stand on it and run or walk or whatever you do, that is set to the setting of 0. So that's how I remember that one. And for an undefined slope, you'd just be standing next to a wall or a treadmill that's, straight up and down, that you couldn't run on unless you had some sort of superpower or anything like that. So that's how I remember the difference between 0 and undefined. A 0 slope I can walk on, an undefined slope I cannot walk up to that wall. Alright, so how do we use this for actually finding the slope of a line? So we're going to use this rise over run, and in order to do this, to find the slope of a line, or the steepness of a line, we need 2 points that are on that line. So we get to pick any 2 points that we want to. It doesn't matter which 2 we use. So for instance, on the left graph here, let's choose, it looks like it goes through the origin. That's always a nice one to choose. And I like to try it to use a neighboring point. So for instance, I also know it goes through the point 1, 1. So my run talks about my horizontal shift, and my rise talks about my vertical shift. So I like to run first and then rise. You can do it either way though. So to get right underneath that point, I go over 1, and then I go up 1. So I should use different colors here. So my run was 1, and my rise was 1, and 1 over 1 equals 1. So the slope of that line is 1, meaning we go, to get from any 2 points that we want to, we go over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1. Notice that I could have chosen 2 other points, any 2 other points, and gotten the same thing. So for instance, maybe this point and this point right here. I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, up 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, 4 over 4 still equals 1. So it doesn't matter which 2 points you choose. Alright, let's look at the second graph here. And also, that should be a positive slope. We should expect to get a negative slope for this one. So 2 points again, maybe the origin, and this point right here. Okay, so my run, I'm going to go over 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's over 4. And then I'm going to go down 1, 2, 3. Now that is going down, it's not rising, so I consider that negative. So my rise is negative 3, and my run is 4, so the slope of that line is negative 3/4. So there we can see the difference between a positive slope and a negative slope. All right. So even when you calculate the rise over run, you can find out if you have a negative slope or a positive slope. Lastly, let's take a look at a horizontal line and a vertical line. You can just remember these if you want to. Remember, a horizontal line has a slope of 0. So really, we can just say that has a slope of 0, but let's look at why that's the case. If we look at rise over run, we can choose these 2 points that are already on here. How far do we run? We go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We run 5, but do we rise at all between those 2 points? No. And 0 divided by 5 is 0, and that's where this 0 slope comes from. Vertical line is just the opposite. If we choose any 2 points on this vertical line, rise and run, this one, we rise, nope, not 0, sorry. We rise, if I start with the bottom point, we go up 1, 2, 3, 4. But we run, we don't go over it at all. And remember, we can't have a 0 in the denominator because that's asking us how many times does 0 go into 4. Well, that's not a real number. It would be an infinite amount of times. So this is that undefined slope. But you will get to the point where you can just memorize those. All right, so that is a very simple introduction to slope in the form of rise over run.